Okay, everyone, we're back once again looking at Chapter 1 in Human Geography. And I said that we were going to move forward here and look at other types of regions. We did look at formal and functional, but let's look at individual types of regions, like a language region. So I don't know if you know, but we're looking at Belgium here, and I wonder if people thought, well, they speak Belgian. But that's not the case. You have some very diverse groups of people here. And so you can see here from Flanders and Wallonia that there is a distinct dividing line between these two groups of people within that country. Okay, so the Flemings speaking Dutch, the Walloons speaking French. Okay, so here is your French neighbor here, and that's where they're going to pick this up. But then if you look here with the Germans are over here in this area, obviously, where juxtaposed to between the in between. So there's going to be some of this mixing going on, and then protected minorities here, real quick, of the Walloons, Flemings, Germans, and so forth. But looking at the dominant language groups here, okay, so Dutch and French, and then those minorities, like right along that line, or next to neighboring countries. Okay, so we'll talk more about this in the chapter over language and what an isogloss is, but this is essentially the line basically drawing the difference between two distinct groups of speakers. If we were to look at Germany, you might not think Germany is that different, but it certainly is. There's a high German and a low German, and so the German in the south, in the high elevation Alps area, is a good bit different, believe it or not, than it is lowland German, okay, which is in the north, so low German. But there's also from east to west, you might remember the Cold War, and the Cold War was whereby the country was split apart. And so that's what this map is right here, okay? So if you look at the Iron Curtain, during that period of the Cold War, this country was separated for that amount of time. And so, believe it or not, these people living behind the wall, behind the Iron Curtain, speak, or they don't speak differently, but they use words differently. Kind of in the same way if you speak to people from Boston or New York or out in California and deep in the Midwest, they have a different speech pattern and use words differently, like here in the United States. So, in demarcating regions, it's pretty neat to kind of consider. And so what are you measuring here too? What if it's the religious beliefs here of the Catholic majority? So the richest state in Germany is this one right here, and it's Bavaria. And having gone to Munich, I can tell you there's a lot of money out here. And then you look at even neighboring countries. You'll find in that language chapter 2, I think it's chapter 4, in that chapter, that German unification of language came about the time of Martin Luther and the creation of the Protestant Church, Protestant Reformation. But that said, not every German speaker falls within the confines of Germany. We just saw them in neighboring countries like Belgium, or here, this is Luxembourg, but also in Switzerland, die Schweiz, they would call this, or Österreich, Austria. Okay, so these are German speakers as well. Okay. So anyway, seeing these differences depends on how you want to talk about the regions and how you're going to define them, by what kind of geography, what kind of culture, religion, or historical. If we're looking at Iron Curtain, that's political geography. So think about those different things. Also look at how important sports is to them. If you're a big soccer fan, you might know some of the names of these teams. But the point is, of course, they have a national team, but they have regional and club teams all over the place. And so, fans are like fans anywhere. Again, Titans and Predators where we live, but it's, Yankees in New York, and it's the Niners out in the Bay Area, California. Okay, so consider these things. Look at this. This is kind of neat too. I got this from a geography book that was looking at transportation geography. Yes, this is actually the cover of the book. Think about how important it is of cargo. This is uniform cargo containers that go on ocean-going vessels that then easily get put over onto vehicles like other modes of transportation like long haul truckers or on railroads and to move goods around. Mass movement of this stuff is really important to the global economy. We wouldn't be moving a whole lot of heavy freight. You'd move like with FedEx. Stuff with airplanes, okay, smaller things, higher value. You couldn't move bulk items like automobiles this way, okay? It just wouldn't work, durable goods and the like. That said, though, look at how, logisticians, logistics and supply chain management, for instance, when you look at it, they know where their nodal points are and how things are connected. This is huge, knowing where certain airline hubs are or where, I mentioned in my previous video about the first video about the Gap, okay, Gap Boulevard. Why is Gap there? Well, it is in very close proximity to three major interstates, okay? It's got Vietnam veterans to work with, but it's right there on close to I-65 north and south, 24, as well as 40 east and west. Okay, so there is a reason why they're putting stuff like that there. Okay, so when looking at that, consider that they're going to look at these nodal regions, these functional regions, and see how they interconnect. What costs them, the least amount, the most bang for the buck of moving goods or whatever it happens to be. Okay, now let's look in your textbook too here and look at mobility, and diffusion's a big one. Okay, so there's several things marked out in your text, but let's just go ahead and look at one. Since contagious diffusion is here and we know about the pandemic, and that's why I'm talking to you over video instead of face-to-face, let's look at how contagious diffusion works. It works from the first person who got sick, who then infects the people nearest to them. Notice that diffusion didn't jump all the way over to here. It was this individual, okay? And it's going to spread from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and so forth. And a later stage here in the contagion. Now, it doesn't always have to be a disease. It could be an idea, a way of doing things, a certain way to fish or a neat way of farming, of contour plowing. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. But it doesn't always have to be disease. The contagion is the person-to-person contact. Okay, so imagine if all of these infected people move to new places. That's what it means here to have these, relocating to another place, and then they get people sick there. Think about West Nile virus. So that thing gets, put on a plane, and you drop people off here, there, and yon, and all of a sudden you have this thing moving around far beyond where it originally began. Again, think about ways of doing things and the way of ideas of say, mass production and an industrial revolution. Why is that centered in Western Europe? Well, it's those countries that were in near proximity that picked it up by contagious diffusion or moved very closely nearby and picked it up that way. Now let's look at this one here too. I'll come back and look at some more of this, but I did want to see here if you know what a hierarchy is. So in a hierarchical diffusion, what we really are talking about is from large, heavily populated cities, then diffusing down to smaller, less densely settled areas. Okay, so again, it could be a new tool, a new whatever. But let me see if I can give you a better example. I remember in college, I met a dude from California, and he had the weirdest shoes on, Birkenstocks. If you don't know what they are, look them up. But it's essentially a cork-bottom shoe with a leather strap and a buckle over the top of it. And I'd never seen that. I was in Memphis, and he was from the Bay Area. So he goes to the shoe store. I'm not kidding you on this. He goes to the shoe store. I took him. He didn't have a car, so we lived on the same floor of the dorm. Took him, and he talks to the guy at the shoe store, and he says, in his funny West Coast talking style, he says, "Hey man, kick me down some Birkenstocks." And the guy looks at him like he's a foreigner. He doesn't know what he's talking about. When he finally makes it known that he wants Birkenstocks, the guy has no frame of reference. He brings him burgundy socks. Memphis is a big city, but it hadn't picked up on this. It hadn't diffused down to people in smaller places and out of the way places. So when you look at this of the hierarchy, it goes from New York and LA down and Chicago down to second tier cities to third tier cities before it finally gets to you, me, and everybody else in Gallatin and farther tucked away places in the U.S. So you often see different kinds of diffusion in this mobility, whether it is stimulated or, again, top to bottom, hierarchical, or whatever it is. So consider these as you're going through the textbook and think about different concepts associated with them. Okay? Now, I'm going to look at this real quick. You could look at it more, but I wanted to look at this nature culture, this human environment interaction, and want to let you know, I'm just going to cut to the chase and say it was for a while people thought that the environment totally determined whether or not you would have a good life or a bad life. And some people still think of it this way, okay? That if you were born in the tropics, the best you didn't have a very good shot of ever succeeding at anything. It's too hot, it's humid, there's too many disease vectors. Why do they do siesta, in Latin America? Because it's sublime hot. You can't work all day. It doesn't work that way. So the thought is that whatever you were born into, you really couldn't break free of that. Now we don't think that way. It's possible. The environment does dictate. Did you have, for instance, in Australia, did you have the kind of things you needed with the plants and the animals and the resources and whatnot? Could you have built a modern production society on that? And the answer is no. They did not have the kinds of plants and animals that could be domesticated and then be a secure food source so that they could come with, grand cities and all these great creations. No. When the British went there, they found they couldn't, who's going to saddle up a kangaroo and go attack someone? It doesn't work that way. You can't domesticate them. So they brought the horses, the cattle, the sheep, the wheat, and everything else down there. So this is that interplay, and you need to understand that. And understanding how, what role the physical geography plays on you and how one would adapt to it. And my daughter's in ecology classes now. She's in university or freshman year. Looking at Judeo-Christian belief here is, God gave the earth to humans, and it's our stewardship, but we can do with it what we want. And most people would say, now, what have we done with it? We broke it. So, there's problems with the environment, global warming and everything else, So when you look at this is what actually Jared Diamond, very famous geographer, as you see, won the Pulitzer Prize with this book. Please take a look at it. If you have the chance to read it, do so. It's great. But he deals with, he says this from the outset in his preface, history followed different courses for different peoples because the differences among people's environments, not because of biological differences among the people themselves. Okay, so you can't just up and label people as shiftless or incredibly bright when the thing I hear people saying now. The guy was born on third base. It's a baseball analogy. He's born on third base, but thinks he hit a triple. Think about our president, Donald Trump, compared to other people. Now, I don't care if you like him or hate him, but was he born into money and status? And the answer is, well, yes. And so he already had a leg up on some of us who weren't. And so understanding that these situations are different for different people in different places are really, do we have to worry about tropical diseases here? No, we don't have to worry about malarial mosquitoes here. They do in the tropics, though. So please, don't go too far in an agenda which is undercut by the reality of a history, a cultural structure, an environmental basis. These things are tied together, and they're different in different ways for different places. Okay, so I want to introduce you to this real quick. Humans as modifier of the earth. This is mountaintop removal. This is terribly destructive to the landscapes. You shear the top off the mountains, you dump it down the hillside. It clogs the streams and messes with the ecosystems of these areas. And then we would see, though, that some would think, well, men do that. That's what they've done. What about women and ecofeminism? And there's certainly those among us, I'm one of them, who looks fondly at this lady right here. She passed away a few years ago, but she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Kenya. Her name's Wangari Maathai, and she came up with the Greenbelt movement. Please look up the Greenbelt movement if you would like to see how she changed the world by planting trees. And so looking at women as stewards of a landscape better than men, has to look at gender roles, and we're going to look at traditional gender roles in this course as well, and consider what they mean for all of us. Okay, checking out on this one. I'm out of time, so I'll see you again in just a bit. Bye-bye.